podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Factory of the Future. I'm here with A.W. Schultz. I'm Alexandria Burek. And today we are going to be time traveling back to 1950. We thought in order to talk about the Factory of the Future, we needed to look to the past. So AW is going to be bringing us some fun facts about the evolution of manufacturing, going all the way back to, as I said, 1950. At the end of this series, we will be fast forward to 2050 and what our predictions for manufacturing in 2050 will look like. So AW, let's time travel. Let's get back to the 50s.
Yeah, 1950s. And the viewers might be asking why 1950? And I realize that our episode is called Factory of the Future, so I can't spend too much time talking about the past. But to your point is we want to talk about what we're looking at in 2050, and I thought it might be relevant to just let's take 100 years. And one thing about 1950, that was post World War II, and I applaud everyone that was around during that time because it was rough, and there was you think about the post-war, and everything is just changing. And where they were starting to make tanks, where they were making tanks there, they went back to making cars. So the assembly line was, while it was introduced in the 1920s, it took a break, along with a lot of other things, to support, the efforts of the World War. And some interesting facts is that, the U.S. economy grew around 37%. Manufacturing employment peaked. And, what was 37% manufacturing, actually 32% was in the farming industry, which, I got to imagine it's a lot less than that, or the farming industry is a lot less than that now. It's just on the nature of how technology has advanced. However, it was called the golden era of American manufacturing. And some of the reasons that drove that was, there was the baby boomers. So there was a lot of, the population was growing a lot faster than what we had anticipated. And, technology just really had a bump from all of the sharing knowledge between the Allies and how other organizations are adapting, had to move fast. And as the World War II had brought forth, pushing forward a lot of technology that we hadn't seen before. So in the 1950s, we had like the three kings in the automotive industry. Not much different than probably today, really. You've got your GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Today, we've got Tesla and other things, and the V8 engine was a big part of what was driving interest. The muscle cars were starting to be introduced, but also the steel industry was making its way. You think about the Pittsburgh area, which I had up to really a lot of research. I did not know how Pittsburgh really. I mean, those are the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? So I mean, that it's kind of that aspect of it. But it was also a big oil industry in the Pennsylvania area.
Really?
Also, yeah, back in the 1950s, and also the steel was introduced to it, and there was a lot of manufacturing. Rockefeller had a lot of input into that area, and he started to engineer and have wells and stuff. And I today I don't notice that. You don't talk about Pennsylvania as being a big oil hub. But,
well, that's like, it's even like what you hear about and think about in West Virginia with the people that used to be coal miners, like by taking that, and the steel factories like U.S. Steel based out of, I believe, Cleveland, Ohio or something in that area. Right. Yeah. So you have all of this manufacturing that basically went away in, I want to say, the 90s. And it was when Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. Basically, that's when we said, oh, don't worry, we're going to move all of our manufacturing over to China or these other countries, and then we'll get the goods for so much cheaper. That's what a lot of people are warning against with what we're talking about right now with AI. So they're saying, if you want to look to the future, look back on history. The promise was we're going to get ridiculously cheap items, which we pretty much did and do, right? That once we moved manufacturing overseas, but what people didn't take into consideration was all of the job loss because of the U.S. manufacturing. How many Americans were doing jobs in those industries that now are jobless or have to be reskilled. And so I think that goes back to some of the conversations that we'll look forward to having with some of our guests in future episodes to be released. It goes back to kind of this whole conversation of, okay, well, everything is ridiculously cheap. And this was the promise as a result of signing NAFTA. But if you look at the cost of goods now, like yesterday I had to take my rug to get washed. And I paid $9 to wash my rug at the laundromat. $9.
That sounds good, right?
Sounds good. To me, that sounds like a lot of money. Think of it, like I'm looking around at the laundromat, and all these people appear to be blue-collar workers, probably not white-collar workers. They can't afford, firstly, an apartment that has laundry, as it would appear. And then secondly, like if you're a family and you're doing 2, 4, 5 loads like that a week, that's like $60 to $100 in laundry.
Wait, this is a big rug, right?
Yeah.
Because I've
the rug
taken
that's
my rug
normally
and it's over $100 to have it dry cleaned.
Okay, so you're doing dry cleaning, but I just washed it at the laundromat. Like these people all around me were doing their clothes. For some reason, why is doing laundry the $9? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying, like, I think everything is just more expensive now. So the promise of having everything become less expensive as a result of AI, that I'm a little skeptical on.
I see your point. The other thing that was going on in the 1950s is the refrigerators were becoming popular. And everyone started getting, and washing machines, like you just mentioned, TVs, air conditioning. Can you imagine not having that? I don't know.
I used to talk to my grandma all the time. They didn't even have freezers. They would get they had an ice box. Like she would be 97 this year. And so,
growing up, we didn't have air conditioning until it was like, I think I was a teenager when my dad finally put it in there. But, growing up in North Dakota, there was only like a week out of the year that you really needed it. But I'm in Dallas now. It's a necessity.
Yeah. They didn't. I think we forget that now is like how far we've come. Okay, so 1950s manufacturing. Can you give us a little bit of a walkthrough? Because I feel like we've digressed and gone down some rabbit holes. But like, what did manufacturing look like in the 1950s?
Unions. That's where the unions start. You had the UAW, the FLL-CIO merger, I guess in 1955. That sounds like something I should probably have a better knowledge on, but from my notes, that's what I have on it. And they were securing higher wages, better working environment. I mean, the steel plants that I've been at is just it's still rough. It's still rough. but I mean, steel was a main factor in it. Assembly lines, shift work, safety improvements. I think that was probably. I think we're going to probably talk about that in later years, but safety was, I'm going to say, had a step back versus productivity, even though it was definitely a demand for it. Other things to think about: automation. There's cars.
What would have been automated in the 50s?
Well, they wouldn't have had robotics, but they would have the assembly. So you'd have maybe conveyors, and
Okay.
certainly, I come from the beverage industry. Fillers were. I think I've been in plants. They still use the same fillers. But
So fillers haven't kept up with the rest of the manufacturing world, huh?
Oh no! I think that they haven't. Well, no, they haven't changed. But I mean, the beverage industry, the fillers the concept is still the same. It's rotating. I mean, it goes fast. It goes really fast, like 1,500 cans a minute. I remember working at these plants, and it's like,
wow.
I was impressive because at one point, I remember when I was working as a supervisor, and we were having problems with one of our fillers, and the caps weren't going on right. I could count. I could pull one out going 600 bottles a minute. That's my max, and I could get it. I don't know why I'm digressing on that, but that's me going down that rabbit hole of geeking out on it stuff. But
yeah.
But the technology I think is relatively the same. I'm sure there's electronics that have been involved in it, but the process is relatively similar. So, but to your question about what would be the automation on it, that's something that goes in my mind. I don't really have a lot of experience in the automobile industry, but that's the hallmark of that kind of that timeline, and pushing out these cars and the automation on it. And you talk about today is you get the gigafactories and Tesla's what they're doing, and the EV plants in China.
Yeah.
But that's that's kind of what I wanted to talk about is what we've seen in the 1950s and post World War II, unions, automation is really starting to kick off. Everyone starts adapting to the Ford philosophy. Interesting fact that I'm not going 1950s, but Ford had the concept that we all know, or a lot of us know that he was the first one to pay somebody like $5 a day, which was a lot back then, and it wasn't the concept of just equal pay for equal work. We can get into the what's his name, Hendricks, or there's a psychology individual that did a lot of time studies, but Ford was very much on efficiency, and he paid his labor with the concept that if they make good money, they will spend money, and he wanted the automobiles to be a commodity. And that was his theory beyond that, and which really it was I think he employed like 200,000 people. So I mean, you can change the market a little bit, especially back in the 1920s, even though we're talking 1950s. But that was something that kind of resonated in my mind, and other companies adapted to that, and especially to be competitive, right? To be competitive, yeah, and to make that mark on that.
In talking about looking at the decades as we go forward, one thing I want to make sure that I'm prepared for, whatever era this is, I want to say it was somewhere in the 70s or 80s, somewhere 70s to 90s, I think. The shift went from call it the Ford methodology of like, pay people more, we'll attract the best talent, we'll have loyalty, the people that are working at our factories will have the money to buy the cars that we're making, and they will become our customers, right? Like that whole concept. the gold watch, right? You get the gold watch when you retire. It shifted. There then became this idea of seeing how little you could pay an employee to still do the job. So companies went from being like ultra competitive and wanting to pay the $5 a day rate to like, well, how about $3? That's when benefits started getting stripped away. So like where in the past, what is foreign to most people, in the millennial and below era generations, is that insurance premiums were all paid for by your company. That was a benefit of employment. You got insurance that was paid for. You did not contribute to your insurance expense. Now that burden is placed on the employee. So that's something I'll plan to research and make sure I plug in the right decade and kind of bring to the conversation. But that goes into the psychology of businesses as well. And I think that's something we should think about as we bring these decade conversations to show the change of business over the course of the century.
Yeah, absolutely. You just kind of sparked my mind a little bit. We should also talk more about unions and their place, because you think about unions, you think about, to me, when you say unions, I think about manufacturing, and that's where it did have a place. It was needed. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I started to appreciate the value it had on it. But I also understand where for-profit organizations don't want it. But it did make a shift on it, and it's something we can look forward for our viewers on a future episode that we can touch on to, unionization and where it played a good part and where things went wrong.
Yeah. So I guess looking forward, this is our first episode, guys, so bear with us. But looking forward, we'll try, as we do each of these decade kind of a time travel back to a particular decade. We'll try to give a little, I guess, flavor for what was going on from a union perspective across the country in regards to manufacturing, what the attitude of employers was towards their companies, because I think that's really changed a lot. And I think that's a lot of what we talk about with Industry 4.0 and 5.0 is like, how do we bring people and technology together in a way that creates a sustainable future for everyone and a society that hasn't completely collapsed or fallen apart. So I think we're in a real interesting time to be alive when it comes to the attitudes of employers and employees. It's certainly different from what it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And it'd be interesting to kind of trace back that tipping point to where we are now.
Yeah. So unless you have something else, Alexandria, I think we're checking out of it, aren't we?
We're clocking out.
Like finished goods.
We're out of here like finished goods. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and look forward to the next episode. We have a very special guest and a very, very interesting conversation that you should really tune in for if you're at all interested in the future of the world and, Absolutely. How AI is going to fit into manufacturing. So stay tuned for that as well.
Goodbye. This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.